we're here today on my college campus on a softball field that was very significant for me. I attended here many years ago. This college is located about 45 minutes north of where I grew up in a little place called Calpin, South Carolina. I grew up in a family of 6. I have 3 brothers, 2 older and 1 younger, and then of course my mom and dad. But growing up in a small town where everybody knows everybody, and back in the days that I grew up, you could keep your doors unlocked. You didn't have to lock your cars. There was no fears and crimes like there are today. So just grew up in a more simpler time, I guess, than today. But one thing that was significant in my childhood was my dad was an alcoholic, and as a result of him drinking a few times too many on several occasions throughout my childhood, he became abusive toward my mother. Many times he was verbally abusive. Most times he was verbally abusive, but many times he became physically abusive. So as a young girl, watching this dynamic in my home caused me to develop some unhealthy and ungodly beliefs toward men, women, and marriage. And as a result of watching these things unfold in my life, I just started making, I guess, vows that I'll never let a man treat me this way, and I felt like women were weak. And I didn't want that. Even though I knew I was a girl, femininity for me meant weakness. And so therefore, I really kind of rejected a lot of feminine things. I grew up playing sports, playing with Tonka trucks and Army men and different things like that. I remember one year I got a purse from one of my aunts for my birthday. And, I didn't play with girl stuff, so having a purse was really foreign to me because I didn't like stuff like that. I did wear church dresses to church and things like that, but I did use the purse to carry my Army men around, so that became my Army men transport. So, but for me, it was more important for me to be like my brothers because I felt like there was a lot of acceptance and love in being a guy than there was in being a girl. So therefore, watching all this go on in my life, I started becoming more like my brothers, wanting to play ball with them, wanting to tag along with them and do those things. And unfortunately, those continued to develop unhealthy and ungodly beliefs throughout my childhood that would really follow me all through school. I was a 3-sport athlete in school. I was, even though I had a lot of identity issues, not knowing who I was, really finding my self-worth and value in what I did and not who I was. I was student body president. Before that, I was class president. I was in numerous clubs and organizations. Anything that went on at school, I wanted to be a part of because I wanted that acceptance and that value and that worth. And unfortunately for me, I equated that with what I did instead of who I was because, again, I just had a lot of identity issues based on the dynamic that was going on in my home. So, therefore, throughout my childhood, I had a lot of things to overcome, and of course didn't know how to do it. I grew up in a Christian home for the most part. My mother took my brothers and I to church, and really had a love for the Lord, had a love for the Word early on. I was a lot different from many of my peers at that same age throughout my childhood and adolescence because I really wanted to know the Lord. I really read the Word and wanted to be involved in church, and it wasn't just a social gathering to sit and pass notes and whisper and do that stuff in church. So I grew up as a Christian, and so I had a lot of convictions throughout my childhood with this area of struggle that, for me, I didn't understand. I felt very different from other girls, other peers, because I felt like I couldn't relate to them because they were all girly and feminine and had boyfriends and worried about makeup and all this other stuff, and that was just foreign to me. I didn't care about that stuff. I was into my Tonka trucks and my comic books and music and sports and all these different things, and I felt like I just could not relate to them. And so that was kind of a difficult area for me growing up, being around guys all the time. I became a lot more masculine in that because I felt like, I found a place where I belonged, but even though I was a girl, I really didn't. But that was significant for me. And but what I didn't know how to, I guess, deal with was this struggle that was going on inside of me. And I guess if anybody had a reason to believe they were born gay, it would have been me, because my earliest remembrance was being attracted to females. I was never attracted to guys. They were more like buddies or competition, but they were not something that I longed for to have a relationship with outside of that. So so I struggled in that area and really just thought maybe it was a phase or something that people just didn't talk about. So, you know, for me, growing up in that, with that struggle going on in my life, and no one talking about it, it wasn't in the news, or nobody talked about it really from the pulpit because it just wasn't a popular thing to talk about. It was just something that I kept private and secretive in my life. And so because I found my identity in what I did and the sports that I was part of, that became a very strong draw and attraction for me. And I love being a part of sports. I never really equated that with finding my significance or identity in. It was just part of who I was at that time, and was a very significant part of my life. And so when I came to college, that was one of three sports that I played while I was here. And but when I came to college, I also found a community that was ready to embrace me. I finally found some identity that I'd never known before, because I felt very odd and different from all the other girls I'd been in high school with. And I was one of the few athletes in my class, and back in that time, people weren't gay and lesbian, they were tomboy and sissy. And so, you know, I just felt very isolated, I felt very alone, I felt very different, and felt like I was the only person that felt the way that I did. And of course now I know that's very different than what was reality. But for me, I just believed the lie that nobody would understand, that I didn't have anybody to talk to. There were never ministries like Truth Ministry that was around for me to have anyone to talk with or have ministry with. So I just really struggled privately. College was a very difficult time for me because I was away from home for the first time, and just really being embraced by a community that was ready to just accept me for who I was and define me, if you will, and give me a definition of finally what I was dealing with, because I never knew if I was gay or lesbian or if this was a phase or whatever it might be. But when I came here, it was apparent that obviously it was more than just a struggle. I had my first relationship when I was 18, and that relationship and the continuing ones after that would really be a marking in my life for the next 15 years. I lived actively and openly as a lesbian. I didn't go around advertising saying I'm gay and lesbian or anything like that, but unfortunately it was an identity that was kind of transferred onto me just because of the way I looked and how I carried myself, which at the time was a lot more masculine. I had very short hair, which is kind of stereotypical. It's not always the case, but I was a lot more masculine in how I dressed and how I carried myself and those kind of things. So I was kind of typically stereotyped in that respect. So, but I didn't embrace it in my heart, and I really struggled, and I would constantly read my Bible. I was involved in church, and I just didn't understand why. I never knew why. I didn't believe that God necessarily made me gay. I just felt like this was an area that may be a curse or like a generational curse or something that just really happened in my life. It wasn't a light switch that came on one day and I said, oh, I'm going to embrace the gay lifestyle kind of thing. But it was just something that just really over the course of time became an identity for me, became a way of life for me. And because those patterns, those thought patterns, those behavior patterns and things were going on for so long, it just became a life for me. It became a embracing of a life for me. And I didn't know any different, even though I really continued to have conviction over how I was living. I felt very condemned. I would transfer condemnation and shame and guilt that I had for myself. I would transfer that onto other people who used to think I was such a model child and student and athlete, and I would see them and all of a sudden I would feel ashamed and feel guilty because I felt like they were looking down on me because of the way I was living. But in truth, that was really how I felt about myself, and I was transferring that onto them. And so that was very difficult for me because, again, I felt, even though I was in a community and in a relationship many times over, I just never really felt comfortable. I really never felt like that was who I was. It was just how I was living, if you will. But it was just a very difficult time for me. And, I was hoping that maybe with each girlfriend or with each situation or with each different environment I was in, that it would get better, that I would find the right one or the person in my life that would make me feel better about how I was living, that would make me feel complete, that would cause me to be more happy, if you will, being the way that I was. But it never was that, because really it was what was going on inside of me. It wasn't my external that was going to make me happier or make me feel any better. It was really just the brokenness that was going on in me, that I was trying to find completion around me. And what I've learned since then is none of those things can complete you. None of those things can make you feel whole. And then in 2004, after living 15 years actively as a lesbian and just embracing that identity for so long, even though it was a struggle, I just finally came to a place after some circumstances that I really just wanted my life to change. I was just sick and tired of living the way that I was. I was miserable in a lot of ways, even with my happiest moments in relationship. It still wasn't reconciling what was in my heart. And so for that summer of 2004, some things happened that I was just finally just tired of it. And I contacted my brother, one of my brothers who was a pastor, and he connected me with a church. And I just really started involving myself, getting connected with people, just seeking the Lord through His Word. I didn't have a truth ministry. I didn't have others that I knew had come out of the lifestyle or who was ministering in this capacity. It was just really just God and I. And I was really, after I walked away from the relationship I was in, from the community that I was a part of, I really had a time of loneliness. For about 6 months, I was really kind of by myself. But to me, that was the most significant thing in my life. I think that was very important. My family had moved out of state, so they were nowhere nearby. So I really only had God to depend on, and just to show me what He had for me and the purposes and plans that He had for my life. And He just really did a healing work in my life. I started changing a lot of the behaviors, a lot of things I was listening to, things I was watching, friendships and people that I was hanging out with. Those things were significant because in order for me to walk out that change, I had to make some of those changes. Yes, God can heal and He can restore and redeem and do all those things, but I had my part to do as well. So it was very significant for me to walk away from those things that had become part of my life. In order for me to embrace a new identity, I had to walk away from an old identity. And so as I did that, I just saw God just continue to show Himself, to pour Himself into me through His Word, through books, Christian books, discipleship books, through my church family, people that just really connected with me and just prayed for me. You know, I thought maybe they would judge me and treat me different because of how I looked and certainly because of the way I lived. But actually that was a very real fear that was unrealized. That what I have learned since then is that more people will support you and encourage you and stand with you than they will condemn you and make fun of you or mock you or whatever it might be. That I had more people who were really ready to embrace me and encourage me and walk with me on this journey. So, thankfully, in 2004, my life changed completely in a lot of ways. It wasn't a light switch that got turned off. It was a journey for me, like it will be for most people that walk away from any life that they're leading, whether it's addiction or anything else. And so as I started walking more toward God and what His design was for me, I really learned who He was as God, and that therefore it resulted in me learning who I was as His daughter. So that was very significant because a lot of those ungodly beliefs, a lot of those unhealthy beliefs and behaviors and things that had just so marked me for most of my life, He really started showing me the truth of those things in my life and how they were not His design. They were not who He wanted me to be, or they were not truth based on His Word, but they were things that, because of my perception or because of my experience, they were things that kind of marked me and caused me to believe those things. So, today, I'm in a completely different place than I ever thought would happen. Change for a lot of people is different. God's not going to take away my softball glove and make me, do my hair and makeup and wear nails and, do my nails and all this other stuff, that, he's not going to completely change you from one person to a completely different person. I didn't go from an athlete to a princess. But what he did show me is that I can use those things that once were for me and that gave me worth and value. I can now use those things to give him glory and honor and to glorify his name with them. That it's not about me, but it's a greater picture. And so I'm very thankful that God took my mess of a life for so long, and now he's able to use that for a message to reach other people. That's been truly a surprising gift for me, because I just thought that, at best my life would change and I would just go on about my life. But he's given me a platform to be able to share what God's done in my life, and that's just been the most awesome blessing, to be able to use what seems like trash for me for a treasure for him. So that's just really been the most awesome thing, and he can certainly do that for anybody, because that's who God is. And so today I'm very thankful that even though it's been a hard journey and it's been a hard life at times, that I am in a better place, that I am on a different road in my life, and that I truly am very thankful for what he's done.